the grimace, right hamstring, and he would walk off and go right to the locker room. So the big three, as they have all season in Brooklyn, struggling with injuries. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving are in, but Harden, you see, off to the locker room after the first quarter. The Bucks lead 32-30.
It'll be interesting to see how that affects the rest of the game, but we're going to send it out to OKC, where I think it's still raining. Guys?
Put this behind you and focus in on Milwaukee.
I'm thinking about them right now.
Just move on.
We got our work cut out for us.
Toward your destination.
May the best team win.
Fear the deer. Bucks Nets game 1 tonight. Official scorekeeper going to have some work to do in Brooklyn, to be sure. Nets big three, you've heard of them: Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, averaged better than 85 points a game in the first round against the Celtics. That is the most ever by a trio in a playoff series. Won that thing in 5. MKE's got a threesome as well. They can shoot. Milwaukee's trio: Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday. They combined for 85 per game themselves in the 3 games against the Nets this season. They took 2 out of 3. Greek Freak averaged nearly 40 points a night in those contests. Teams combined to score 238.7, let's call it 239 points per game during the regular season. Tied for the most between playoff opponents over the last 50 years. The Jazz Nuggets had the same number prior to their first round meeting, 1984. That was certainly a different era. Who needs coach speak? Certainly not us. Let's put Malika Andrews on television and get to what's really happening in this series. Malika, the Nets' big three, they were actually that in that series against the Celtics because they played 5 games in a row. It's the first time that happened all season. But now how can they make that better?
Well, if you ask James Harden that question, he would say defense. That is what they are focusing in on here, John. What he would like to see is more defensive stands that he's proud of, because in his words, sometimes those stands, they lead to sheesh. That's the word he used, offensive sequences. And so that's what he wants to put together. But as you mentioned, in total, the Nets' big three have still only played 13 games together this season. That's the regular season and postseason combined. And so James Harden said the difference on previous playoff teams he's played with in OKC, in Houston, is that in some point in the regular season, they were already playing their best basketball. He said he doesn't feel this Nets group has hit that apex yet, but has confidence that they will if they keep rolling and are defensive-minded in this series against the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Bucks like to pretend they have a big-time trio, but really, I've seen them enough. It's a big one, which is why they've eventually fallen short here the last couple of years. How can they make Middleton and Holiday actual sort of equal partners in this venture?
Well, Drew Holiday is one of those new pieces, right, John? And so that's something that they're looking at to give them a real defensive backbone in this series where their opponents have so much offensive prowess, have so much firepower. Drew Holiday is a 2-time all-defense member. Chris Middleton is a 2-time all-star. And so they're looking for Chris Middleton's sharp shooting to continue. He's also a little bit of an underrated defender. They're going to need him to be tight there. They're going to need Drew Holiday to be a dog. PJ Tucker likes to talk about the fact that this team has dogs. And Bobby Portis said, you know what? One thing about this Bucks team, you can't smell blood on it. They're hoping that comes to fruition against the Nets tonight.
Good guys, got to use everybody. That is Malika Andrews in Brooklyn for the playoffs, which is not the bubble. Hooray for you, Malika. Boy, one of the great hitters in the history of that game, one of the great pitchers, both right there. Breaking news coming out of Dublin, Ohio. That's Columbus. That's Jack Nicklaus's Memorial Tournament. John Rahm testing positive for the coronavirus, COVID-19. He had a 6-stroke lead in the tournament. He was 18 under. His nearest pursuers were there at 12 under. He finishes up, and on 18, when he gets done, they inform him he's tested positive, and he has to withdraw from the tournament. Just like that. It's an entirely new tournament. Here from the PGA Tour gives us sort of a timeline of what happened. On the evening, Monday, May 31st, the PGA Tour notified John Rahm that he was subject to contact tracing protocols as he had come in close contact with a person who was COVID positive. Per the tour's COVID health and safety plan, Rahm was given the option to remain in the competition and enter our tracing protocol, which includes daily testing, restricted access to indoor facilities. Rahm has remained asymptomatic. Rahm has tested negative every day But his most recent test, which was performed after the conclusion of the second round, there was a rain delay, and before the start of the third round, so that was this morning, returned a positive at approximately 4:20 p.m. Eastern while Rahm was on the golf course. We showed you that. He was on the 12th hole making birdie. The PGA Tour's medical advisor requested a confirmatory test of the original sample, which came back at 6:05 Eastern and was also positive. And then that's when they caught Rahm as he was finishing up a brilliant round of 64, 8 under to take the tournament lead, take control, that he was done and had to withdraw from the tournament. Bob Herrig on the phone with us right now. And Bob, this has got to be the Tour's worst nightmare. They've avoided this for 16 months. Just give us what you know about the situation.
Yeah, you're right, John. It's not great. I mean, this was something that everybody worried about being able to happen when they came back basically a year ago, and it never did. I mean, they never had this situation. It's only the fourth time there's been a positive test within a tournament, obviously not under circumstances where the guy's leading and leading by 6 shots. But as you outlined there, he's been tested every day. There's been some wonder why didn't they get him off the course earlier? They didn't know. The second round had to be completed this morning. They basically then went back out a couple hours later. He was tested this morning. The results don't come back right away. They got a positive about 4:30. He was still on the course, but they wanted to run another test on the original to make sure it wasn't a false positive. They didn't get that result until 6:05, which was basically almost exactly when he was finishing up on 18. They then immediately told him. Crazy thing is, he now has to go into isolation for 10 days. He's not going to be able to come out until June 15th, which is the week of the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, where Rahm's won a tour event a few years ago. So not only does it impact this event, but it could impact him trying to win a major championship as well.
You mentioned there's only 4 positive tests. In the statement from the tour, it says, including Rahm's. And he said that we could pick up just a little of the audio from the broadcast where he goes, "Oh, no, not again." Fill us in on some of the backstory here, if you could.
Yeah, I believe Rahm has had COVID before, is what he was referring to there. I don't believe he ever tested positive at an event, but he had the virus at some other point in the process. It's unclear if he's vaccinated. The tour is not requiring players to be tested weekly anymore if they're fully vaccinated. Problem is, this is a contact tracing issue. He had been in close contact with someone else who had COVID. So we don't know yet. We're waiting to find out if that still means he would have had to test every day, even though he's vaccinated. Clearly, he did have to test every day, and he's returned negative tests all this time until now.
The tour is going to have a 7:15 Eastern time news conference to further go into this. But in terms of contact tracing, he played with Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele. Do we know what their status is right now?
Yeah, I mean, apparently they're good to go. We'll find that out. One thing about it is, they are outdoors. These guys have been playing. They've been playing for a year under these circumstances. There's as we've gotten farther along, especially in golf, there's been a sense that being outdoors is okay. Now, they did not allow Rahm all week to use any indoor facilities. He was not allowed to use the locker room. He was not allowed to use player dining, as other players are allowed to do. So in that regard, I think they feel they're okay. And the actual contact tracing among players in competition doesn't seem to be much of a thing. Due to the fact that, like I just said, they're outside, they're not in close contact for long periods of time. But I think we're gonna find out a lot more of those details here shortly.
Jon Rahm, 8 under 64, had a hole-in-one, and then had his entire day ruined by COVID-19. Bob Herrig on the story. We'll keep track of it. Hear from you later tonight on SportsCenter, I'm sure, after the tour holds its 7:15 news conference. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks much.
Coming up next on SportsCenter, it's the Nets, it's the Bucks, and it's at Barclays. Malika Andrew will join us live for a preview of Game 1. Coming up next.